Hello, and welcome to the Truthwards podcast, where we discuss the details of natural solutions for chronic health conditions. I'm Natalie Kasana, and I'm so happy and grateful that you are listening. I hope you will enjoy it or get something useful out of this series. In this second episode, you'll learn about my experience resolving my baby's eczema with natural solutions. Specifically, I'll share every detail of what I did, how I did it, and how his eczema changed over time. I'll also share the challenges I faced, how I resolved them, and some tips and tricks so that you could try exactly what I did at home if you wanted to. I'd like to start by noting that the views and opinions shared during this podcast are my own and do not reflect the views of my employer or any affiliated organizations. That equally applies to any guests that may appear on the podcast as well. Additionally, because we will be talking about health topics, I want to make clear that I am not a licensed healthcare professional, and any advice shared on this podcast is not meant to be a substitute for professional medical advice, nor a guarantee that the same results would be seen by anyone else. I would always encourage anyone to seek the opinion of a healthcare provider before trying any possible healing paths. It is important to establish a clinical diagnosis and assess possible risks or interference with current medications. So as I just said in the introduction, my baby suffered from eczema. This means red, thick, itchy skin, flaky skin, bleeding discharge, clear discharge, lots of itching all over his body, and he would cry a lot. It was miserable for him. I know because I experienced it and it looked awful. The type of solution that ended up working was a diet-based solution. It was a major diet change, becoming vegan, grain-free, with specific added foods and supplements. And how much of a recovery did we experience through natural solutions? My son achieved 100% freedom from eczema, and I also saw a complete reduction of the remainder of 5 to 10% of my eczema, as I mentioned in the first episode, so that then I was 100% free of eczema as well. So I'll start by sharing a few details about my baby, my son. He was born at a normal weight, 7 pounds, 6 ounces. He was born 1 week early at 39 weeks. Overall, a pretty healthy, normal birth, a natural delivery, and he has had no other notable health conditions since birth. He's been born and raised in New York City, and he was fed exclusively on breast milk up until he started eating solids, and I discontinued nursing him around 14 months. And I'm sharing all of these details because I think it's important to know all the factors as much as we can think of so that other people can compare to their own situations and decide whether they're similar or not and whether this might be something that they want to consider or not. So how did it all start, and when did we first start seeing symptoms on him? He was about 4 months old, and I noticed a red patch on his upper arm starting to get a little bit bigger and wider and not really going away. At that age, he can't scratch himself or indicate anything, so I couldn't tell if it was itchy or not. I just noticed that red patch. At first, I just put on some lotion, thinking that it could just be dry skin. It was February. At one of his pediatrician appointments, I showed the doctor that red patch, and they suspected eczema, especially since I had had it as well. And they said it's pretty common. They see a lot of babies with eczema. They offered to prescribe a steroid cream, but I declined it at that time, thinking it was still manageable. And also because I knew from my own experience that it didn't really do anything, and I didn't want to put a steroid cream on my baby because of the negative side effects of steroids, especially over a long period of time. But I admit, I was at a loss. How could my baby be suffering from chronic mental stress patterns like I had been? I mean, it doesn't really apply to a 4-month-old baby, and that had been the main solution for my eczema, as I shared in the prior episode. So this really concerned me and bothered me because here I thought I had a solution to eczema, and it didn't work for my baby. And even if that was the cause, how are you going to help a baby deal with their chronic mental stress patterns, right? Like, I don't know. So over time, the symptoms started to progress. They got more on his arm, and then they spread to the other arm and started to go down the arm a little bit, so on all parts of his arm. And then it started to spread to his face. I noticed it on his cheeks, and they started getting more red. And this all happened in just a few weeks when he was 4 to 5 months old. Now, how did I find out about the solution that eventually worked? It happened to be that at the same time, I was trying to help my husband figure out a natural solution for his pretty extreme seasonal allergies. And we were exploring all options. He had previously tried other options, and that's a story for a different episode. But my sister had done a cleanse diet for a condition that she was trying to resolve, and she said that it may be beneficial for seasonal allergies. So we decided to look into it. We read the book she recommended and decided to give it a try. The book was one called Medical Medium by Anthony Williams. Now, I want to pause here and note that, yes, there may be controversies about certain natural solutions recommended out there, but on this podcast, we are not speculating about what is right or the source of the information. We are simply gathering observations of what was tried and what happened, completely separate from any beliefs or hypotheses as to the causes of the conditions or why the solutions may work. Every possible natural solution that worked for someone is welcome on this podcast, even if different stories contradict each other. Only by considering all information out there will we eventually be able to understand what actually works best for each chronic health condition. There are a lot of promising reports out there from other people based on Anthony Williams' recommendations. And to me, they are generally aligned with what I consider to be a pretty healthy diet, like eating lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. And he also recommends things like cutting potentially inflammatory foods like wheat and dairy, which do align with many other reports out there, and which have been found in other studies to be associated with inflammation and with chronic health conditions. Again, we were trying this diet for my husband's allergies, not with the intention, actually, of curing eczema. But since it was a very healthy diet by many standards, I decided to give it a try in solidarity with my husband. And also because it's much easier if everyone's eating the same thing in a household, so you can cook the same thing together. And spoiler alert, the diet did not work for my husband's seasonal allergies, but it had a major impact on my baby's eczema and on the residual of my own eczema. So again, I stumbled on the ultimate answer for my baby's eczema by pure accident at the right time. Impeccable timing. I am still so grateful to this day that we started that diet at that time. I don't even want to imagine how much suffering my baby would have gone through if I hadn't started that diet at that time. So what are the details of the solution that actually worked? I promised on this podcast I would explain every detail of exactly what we did. Of course, I don't know if each step is actually necessary, but the overall combination of steps we did was effective for us in our observation. And I want people to be able to try the exact same thing that we did if they want to. So bear with me, I'm going to dive into every detail right now. So these are the dietary changes that we made. We removed wheat. This means all bread, pasta, muffins, and things made with wheat. So we went fully gluten-free. We removed dairy. We cut milk, cheese, butter, yogurt, cottage cheese, all dairy. We removed eggs. At the time, we ate a lot of eggs, and we completely cut them out of our diet. Although meat and fish are actually okay on this diet, we already didn't eat meat, and we decided to just go completely vegan for a while, meaning we cut fish too. The only animal product we did still eat is honey. And we removed all processed sugar and other things like canola oil, natural flavors, and soy. And I want to add that eventually, after trial and error, we ended up removing all grains as well. So that includes oats and rice. And then there's a bunch of things that we added. Every morning, we drank lemon water first thing, followed by celery juice, followed by a breakfast smoothie, which consisted of some specific ingredients: wild blueberries, cilantro, Atlantic dulse, which is a type of seaweed, spirulina powder, and barley grass juice powder. And in addition to these 5 specific ingredients, which Anthony Williams recommends to have combined in a smoothie, we added bananas, dates, water as the base, and other fruits we liked, like frozen mango or something like that. And we heated the water so it wasn't freezing cold for breakfast every morning. Another thing is we avoided eating fats in the morning, ideally up until noon. But if you wanted to, all day would be even better. Sometimes we would end up eating fats earlier than noon, but the idea is to minimize or have 0 fats for as long as possible in the day. And additionally, we took a few specific vitamins, vitamin B12, zinc, some vitamin C, and some magnesium. We made sure that all the vitamins were not man-made, but from a natural source. And one last important note is that we cut all caffeine and alcohol. Now, how did we go about implementing all these changes in our life? It is a lot of change, and these were some of the things that we did. We ate a lot of potatoes, so that replaces grains as a carbohydrate. So that's sweet potatoes and regular white potatoes, gold, red, any kind of potato. We replaced rice with quinoa. And you may have a not great opinion about quinoa, but we found that if you rinse it, cook it well, and then add a little coconut oil with a pinch of salt, it's actually really delicious. It's grown on me a lot, and it's toddler approved. I've had my toddlers come back for seconds of plain quinoa with just coconut oil and a pinch of salt in it. For baby oat cereal, we replaced it with something we found at Whole Foods. It's a buckwheat cereal, but it's hulled and very fine. So it doesn't taste like anything. Buckwheat has a pretty strong flavor, which I don't like. Most people don't like. But if you get a hulled version that takes the outside layer off, and this cereal we found is very bland and basically tastes like oatmeal. And my kids loved it with some mashed banana in it. So that was a really great find for a baby food. And to be clear, buckwheat is not a grain, it's a seed. So some things out there like buckwheat, quinoa, amaranth, there's a few other I'm not thinking of right now, but they're not actually grains, they're seeds. That's why they don't trigger that same effect that cereal grains do. For wheat and bread, our main 2 replacements have been roti and mini muffins. So the roti it's like a flat bread that similar to like a soft tortilla. It's a typical Indian flatbread actually. And we made it out of cassava flour. We still do this. We make it out of cassava flour and we combine it with amaranth flour or a garbanzo or chickpea flour. And it acts the same as a regular wheat roti. It actually puffs up on the stove. And also we make a lot of mini muffins, which is a recipe where I've figured out a flour combination that works quite well with buckwheat, potato starch, cassava flour, and flaxseed, along with banana and dates. And it makes a pretty good recipe. And I will share all these recipes in exact details as soon as I can. I know it's a little hard to share those details on a podcast, but giving you an idea of the types of things that we used to replace wheat and dairy and some of these common things. So for dairy, for butter, we replaced it with coconut oil in recipes, on toast, and sometimes olive oil. And we would add a pinch of salt to make it taste a little more like butter. And I really like that flavor of coconut oil. In fact, I've come to prefer it over butter. This is something very interesting. Your taste might change over time. I used to love butter and milk and all these cheese. Oh my God, cheddar cheese was my favorite thing. And over time, I just don't like it as much. I've tried it again. I'll explain later. I did go back and try these things again after cutting them for a while. Part of me likes it and part of me's like, I don't really need it anymore. So you may find that your tastes change. And for cheese, we use cashew cream in some recipes like lasagna or on a pizza. And for milk, we use any of the typical substitutes like almond milk. Yeah, any like non-dairy milk, but not oat milk because oat is a grain. So all those other milks, anything that you like works. As minimally processed as possible, though, with as few additives and preservatives as possible. This brand Elmhurst offers this coconut cashew milk. That is my new favorite. And then for replacing sugar, we use maple syrup and honey. It's been known in studies to be antibacterial, antiviral, and very good for you. In my tea right now. For replacing sources of protein like meat, fish, and eggs, we eat a lot of lentils. Also to replace soy, I make a red lentil tofu. And for things like tacos, we do a lot of beans, like black beans. And for snacks, we have pumpkin seeds on salads, all sources of vegan protein, along with quinoa. Things like quinoa, which are a seed, they're actually a complete protein. While there's a lot of things that you might be thinking, oh, now I can't eat this, I can't eat this, I would say try to focus on the things you can eat and be creative there. Because the reality is, what I realized is people and cultures and societies, they almost are like getting in a rut with certain things that are eaten all the time. But it doesn't mean there's not a huge variety of options out there that are still like completely unexplored just because it's easy to do the same thing over and over again. And we get used to it and we like it and we expect it. But it's like music or artwork or style, fashion. There's always something new that's going to be explored out there that people just aren't used to or haven't figured out yet. And that's the same with recipes and food. There's actually a world of food options that are just not what we're used to. They're not the typical pizza, bagel, pasta, like everything that we're just accustomed to. There is so much creativity that can be explored and done. It does take energy, of course, but the options out there are endless. And don't feel like you're too restricted. You're only restricted within the narrow area of what you typically eat that might not fit this diet anymore. But there's so many other options out there. It's just a matter of taking the time and effort to try new things and adjust your taste a little bit. And you don't always need to replicate things that you're used to, like pizza or something like that. Try something completely different instead of trying to replicate something you already like, because then you might be disappointed. Maybe you'll find something brand new you never even knew you liked. And again, what we focus on is what can we eat? What are the options that are available? So starting with each meal. For breakfast, we have this smoothie. My kids love this smoothie. They crave this smoothie. It's the first thing they ask for every morning when they wake up. They can't wait to have their smoothie. And it's all fruits. Mid-morning, we often have mini muffins or pancakes or banana with a nut butter on it. Lunch, we'll often have like these rotis with hummus or a nut butter or sun butter for school because you can't send nuts in the school lunches. Afternoon snacks, we'll have fruit all day long. We'll have things like cucumber slices with a little almond butter and a little slice of date on them or things like that. And then for dinner, I just recommend having an array of options you can pick from that you've kind of practiced and figured out. Have 5, 6 options you can rotate and get used to. And then you can always experiment when you have time and energy, but you don't want every dinner to be stressful like an experimentation. So that's how we went about implementing these changes. Oh, one thing I want to note is with legumes, things like lentils and beans, make sure you soak them adequately ahead of time. And that takes a little forethought to make sure that you soak them either overnight or in the morning for dinner. And I recommend soaking them with a little bit of acid, like apple cider vinegar, added to the water. It helps them to break down more and soak better and faster. Now, were there any challenges that we faced while trying to implement these solutions? I won't lie. Yes, there were many, many challenges. Something I don't like is when someone makes something sound super easy and then I go to try it and it's really hard for me. And I'm like, why can't I do it? That person did it so easily. What's wrong with me? Why can't I do it? Like when it says it takes 10 minutes to make a recipe and it takes me half an hour. And I'm like, why does it take me so long? Why am I so slow? No, they should have just put a more accurate measurement, in my humble opinion. So it is very hard to change your entire diet when you have 2 young kids, very young kids, you're working full time, you're super busy, and now everything that's your routine has to be rethought. That is very overwhelming and hard to figure out and time consuming. So yes, if this feels hard for you, it was for me too, but you can do it. And it's worth it. And when you do achieve something, if you see improvements in your condition, you will feel so amazing. And know that you are doing something truly amazing by trying to overcome your chronic health conditions and achieve true health. And pump yourself up and be proud of yourself. And that will give you the energy that you need, the determination that you need to get through those really hard times that feel impossible sometimes. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Once you settle into a new routine, when you've figured out a series of things that work for you, it becomes easier because you get used to it. I have all these mini muffin and roti recipes totally memorized. I can do them without thinking. It becomes easy. It becomes less stressful. It becomes the new norm. So it does get easier. Now, some things did remain tricky. Traveling is not easy. Thinking ahead of what are you going to eat and what are the available options? There's very few options out there that meet all of these criteria. So if you're trying to be really strict, you have to end up packing a lot of food or maybe skipping social engagements or just barely eating, maybe just eating fruits and vegetables when you're out. And that is challenging. I don't deny it. Like, for example, kids' birthday parties, which we are invited to a ton of every year with 2 kids. The food is always basically pizza and cupcakes. And to be honest, I don't blame parents for only offering pizza and cupcakes at birthday parties. There's not a lot of great options out there that you can buy in bulk to feed a bunch of kids that kids will actually eat and be happy with. I've done it myself for a birthday party. You don't want to deprive your kid of being in a social environment, but at the same time, like, how are you supposed to stick to something you're actually trying to do? It's challenging. It puts you in a tough position. And we don't want to be too restrictive on our kids either, because if they're told you can't eat that everyone else is eating all the time, they might feel like they're being somehow held back and they don't get what everyone else gets and they might feel left out, or I don't know. It's tricky. Like, being a parent and making these decisions is not easy, right? We ended up not attending as many birthday parties as we were invited to. And when we did, for our younger son who was struggling with eczema, we would pack food for him. One thing to keep in mind is it's not forever. So we found, and I'll explain more about this later, after a period of time, having a few exceptions here and there no longer triggered his eczema. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. This is not forever. If you're pretty strict for a certain period of time, maybe, 6 months to a year, everything can start to open up a little bit. And that period of time is going to be different for different people. And the level of exceptions afterwards that the body can tolerate will also be different. But the point is, yes, it could be really hard in the beginning and it could be hard to maintain your typical schedule and social engagements, but things can get more flexible after some time. And I'll share more details about that. And one of the main challenges I faced is simply time. And I still face this, how do you have enough time to make all your food from scratch if you also work full time and you're also, taking care of the kids and the normal stuff? It's very, very hard to do all of that home cooking from scratch and have it ready on the typical busy schedule of the modern lifestyle. And granted, I don't think it was easy for people back in the olden days either. Well, it's still not easy. One thing I recommend is it's okay to not be an idealist all the time. For example, we eat way too much chickpea pasta for dinner. It is so simple. It's half an hour from start to finish. Cook the pasta, add some sauce, and guess what? It's the kids' favorite meal. It's a win-win. It technically fits the diet. The pasta's just made of organic chickpea flour. Now, is it a processed food? Kind of. It's not the most fresh, but at the same time, there's some protein in it. And we still achieved complete remission from his eczema while eating a lot of chickpea pasta. So try to find things that work for you and don't be too hard on yourself. If you can't get to something because you're focusing on cooking all the food from scratch, don't worry about the other thing. Don't try to be perfect. This is a lot. It definitely is. And just be proud of yourself for what you do accomplish. And no, I don't make celery juice every morning anymore. It's just one more thing I can't seem to fit into the morning routine with the kids and packing lunches. But I did do it regularly for about a year. Every single morning I made celery juice, and I still try to do as much as I can, like on the weekends or when I do have time in the mornings. So things will change over time as well. I do have to share two of my ultimate hardest moments in this process. They're kind of funny looking back, but in the moment, they were really not funny. But just to give you an idea of how hard it felt for me in the moment, again, hard is a relative thing, guys. I mean, people have really hard lives out there. But for me, this felt hard to achieve with a tiny baby, right? Under 6 months, a toddler. I guess he was like 2.5 or 3. And I went back to work and my baby wasn't sleeping and I was on very little sleep for a very long time. So again, hard is relative, but 2 moments I have to share. So when I decided to change the diet, I decided to also start packing the lunch for my toddler who was going to daycare. And I just wanted to, across the board, implement this diet for our whole family. And he was anyways not really eating the most healthy things at school. They were offering good options, but all he would eat is like the plain wheat pasta. And I didn't think that was very good for him anyways. So I committed to this and I was like, okay, here we go. What are we going to pack for lunch? And I found this little mini muffin recipe and it had almond flour in it. And then I realized you can't send nuts to school. And I had a total collapse moment where I just sank into a chair in the living room and I started crying and sobbing to my husband. I was like, what can I actually put in this lunch? I can't do wheat. I can't do dairy. I can't do nuts. I can't do anything. There's nothing I can actually put in this poor kid's lunch. That moment, I was just it just felt impossible. So what I did end up putting in the school lunches, in case you're curious, are roti sandwiches. So I'd make these roti and I'd put on some sort of filling like hummus or sun butter or pesto with a little honey if they like that. And then I would also do slices of boiled potato with a drizzle of olive oil and a pinch of salt. They like that. Mini muffins are big. I send them every day. And different kinds. Sometimes a banana one, sometimes a pumpkin one, zucchini bread one. There's different variations you can do. And then lots of fruit, apple slices with the lunch, and different kinds of fruit in the afternoon, like blueberries, oranges, grapes cut up a little. And then sometimes I do have a backup option, which I don't use every day, but some sort of nut-free, grain-free cracker. I found that the brand Simple Mills has a good grain-free organic cracker. So I'll have that as a backup and I'll throw that in for snacks sometimes. Things like pumpkin seeds and raisins, and you can explore other options, but it took me a while to figure that out. And the other story I have to share, this is again so my baby wasn't sleeping. So by the time he fell asleep, sometimes I would fall asleep with him and then I didn't get a chance to, let's say, bake the mini muffins, which I needed to have ready for my son's lunch for the next day. So sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would go in the kitchen and bake mini muffins. So one night I was doing that and basically I'm standing next to the kitchen counter and I'm kind of just stepping gently from side to side as I'm grabbing ingredients and grabbing dishes, making these mini muffins. And then one time when I step down, I hear and I feel a crunch. And I was like, what was that? Did I step on a piece of food? And I looked down and I had stepped on a big cockroach. I can't even, the memory is horrible. I screamed and no one woke up in the house. I just freaked out and I ran out of the kitchen, dropped my shoe. And then I came back slowly and I was like, well, I have to deal with this. And I looked down and the smushed cockroach had escaped. It wasn't dead. These things don't die. I'm telling you, I've seen cockroaches lying there on their back with their feet up. You think it's totally dead for half a day. And I went to go pick it up and put it in the garbage with a paper towel, and it started moving. It came back to life. These things are crazy. Oh, I can't stand them. And like, this was a beautiful old building, actually a very clean building. But the thing is, these things live in the walls of these old buildings. It's impossible to escape. Like every now and then, it's almost impossible to avoid having one in your house in New York. It's a very common problem, unfortunately. But it was just like, this is too much. I'm so tired. I'm up late doing this. Why do I have to step on a cockroach? Come on. Anyhow, I made it through. But those were two of my low moments where I was just like, I can't handle this. So, when did we start to think that the diet was working? It wasn't immediate. When I started that diet, again, I started it for my husband's seasonal allergies, just in solidarity with him, not for the eczema. So I wasn't really expecting anything. I wasn't even looking for anything. His eczema was already getting worse, regardless of any dietary changes I made. And keep in mind, he was only nursing. He was only 4 or 5 months old. I also didn't think that me changing my diet would have that big of an impact. Like, I had heard it could have an impact, but I wasn't expecting that much. Let's put it that way. And I noticed, though, that whatever symptoms I had, like gas or bloating in the beginning, he also had. And then I noticed his eczema got worse for a while. And of course, I was like a little concerned, but I also was like, interesting, because I had read that often symptoms will get a little worse before they get better as the body is maybe like clearing out whatever is bothering it. So I, of course, monitored it with the pediatrician as well. And yes, they got worse, but in a way that is not unexpected, let's say. And then after about 3 to 4 months, maybe, he started to turn a corner. I think it was even less than that, maybe like 2 to 3 months. The symptoms stopped getting worse and kind of stagnated, and then like slowly started to get better. That's when we were like, maybe there's something to this. And I want to go into the timeline of his improvement, because there were 2 periods where it kind of stagnated or got worse again. And I want to explain why that happened or what we changed that then allowed it to continue to resolve. Again, we started this diet in like February or March. He was 4 months old. By the summer, it was starting to get better, although definitely not gone. The thing is, it wasn't improving after that. So we were like, what are we missing? Is there still something that's bothering him a bit? My husband read at that point that all grains, not just wheat, could be a problem. And he was starting to have some rice crackers. We were still eating rice at that point, and oat cereal. So we decided, and this again was like, oh my God, we're cutting another thing. Oats and rice we cut. I was like, what am I going to feed this kid now? But that's when we luckily found that buckwheat cereal and a few other options. Then in just a couple more months, his eczema had completely faded away. Gone. Nowhere on his body. I mean, that was amazing. On one of the pediatrician visits around this time, sometime in the fall, it was probably after his 1-year birthday, the pediatrician said his iron levels were a bit low. Not very low, just a bit, which is honestly, I think, very common. Babies who have been breastfed, they can often have a little bit of a low iron level, according to the standard range. And so they recommended an iron supplement. And I really didn't want to give an iron supplement, but I felt like I probably should. So I found one that was a kid's iron supplement. It said it was super digestible, meant for kids. And I started giving that to him in January. And by February, his eczema was coming back. Now, at the time, I obviously didn't put 2 and 2 together right away. I wouldn't have given him the iron supplement. But in February, when his eczema started coming back, I was like, what did we change? We didn't change anything. His diet, we were doing the exact same diet, and suddenly his eczema came back. Thank goodness I remembered the only thing I had changed in his diet was this iron supplement. Of course, I immediately stopped the iron supplement. And as before, his eczema got worse before it got better. And in this period, it got really bad all over his body. I mean, just horrible, horrible, like red and itchy all over. Arms, leg, backs. The poor kid was scratching, crying, up at night. The only way we made it through this time is we knew we had gotten rid of it before. So we knew it could go away. So we had hope. So we basically followed the same diet. And as it got worse, we just tried to be patient. And slowly over time, it started to fade again. And by the summer, it was completely gone again. So January, I started that vitamin. February, it came back. All spring, it was really bad. It like peaked and then started to slowly get better again. And by the summer, it faded away completely again. And I share that because it gives you an idea of the timeline of having added something that triggered it, discovering that and cutting it only maybe a month or a few weeks later, and the timeline it took for that to fully like flush out of his body or basically stop triggering the eczema for whatever reason, it took about 5 months, maybe. But it did completely fade away again. And you know what's interesting? So I stopped that iron supplement immediately. When he went to his 2-year appointment, his iron levels were perfectly normal. So it had nothing to do with following a vegan diet and not eating meat. It was something else, and his body was able to get enough iron on a regular vegan diet with no iron supplement. Of course, I regret having given him that supplement, but it also was a useful lesson to learn. So when his eczema was at its worst, when he went to daycare, I used to put ointment on his arms, and then I used to wrap his arms in bandages so that he wouldn't scratch them, and it would kind of keep the moisture on his arm. And also, before I put the lotion on, I would make sure that it was moist. So if he didn't just come out of the bath, I would take a wet washcloth and I would moisten his arm. Then I would put the lotion on, like shea butter. Again, whipped shea butter is a good one. And then I would wrap the bandage around. And that would keep it moist, keep it protected, and definitely minimize the itch. And I knew from my own experience that that was the most soothing because I had done that kind of thing when my eczema was bad. I will be honest, at one point when I brought him to the pediatrician's office, the pediatrician was like, "Oh my God, you have to give this kid some steroid cream. Like he's suffering so much because he had eczema all over his whole body." And of course I felt horrible. Like I'm sure he is suffering, but I was like, oh, let me just at least try temporarily putting a little steroid cream on him just to ease the itch a little bit, knowing that we were already implementing a solution that would work long term. I was like, let me just give him a little temporary relief. So I was like, okay. And I agreed to get the prescription steroid cream from the pediatrician. And I tried putting it on 2 areas, which at the time were the worst. I think they were on his legs, somewhere on his legs. And this is fascinating. Within that day or the next day, those areas calmed down. They weren't quite as red. But guess what? Right around those areas, the other parts that had not yet been affected got all these red spots on them and got really itchy. It's like the eczema could no longer escape or come out on the area where I put the steroid cream. So it just went to the other part of the skin that didn't have the steroid cream that previously hadn't had any eczema. It didn't stop the problem. It just pushed it to another part of his skin. So I was like, I'm not doing this. Am I just going to like push all the eczema to the parts of his skin which are already okay? No, thank you. That's not going to help anything. So I just like stopped the steroid cream right away. Hey, I gave it a try. It didn't work. And also interesting to think what the steroid cream is actually doing. It's just suppressing the symptoms. It's not in any way stopping them. If the body has to do what it has to do, it's going to do it in another part of your body. Now, how did we feel when he finally was eczema free that summer and he could wear t-shirts and his cute little arms had soft, perfectly smooth skin with no itch? I mean, that is still to this day, I think, my biggest accomplishment in parenthood is helping him to get rid of his eczema. Oh, the relief that you have as a parent when you are able to relieve the suffering of your child, there is nothing more. In my experience thus far, I am so, so grateful that we stumbled upon that diet and we were able to figure out the right combination of things to eliminate and add that somehow worked, even when he was still nursing, too. And such an accomplishment. All that hard work to prepare all that food, to figure out all those alternative recipes, all the exhaustion on top of the normal exhaustion of early parenthood. It all felt like it paid off and it was worth it. Were there any side effects of the diet or all the things that we tried? Yes. The number one side effect was, and I call it a side effect because it wasn't for my baby, it's for me. The rest of my eczema, the remaining 10% of my eczema, completely faded away. So as I had said in the first episode, 90% of my eczema disappeared when I dealt with my underlying mental chronic stress thought patterns, when I resolved those and changed those. But I still would have always like a little bit of eczema, just like a little bit around my knuckles, especially when I was like stressed or, super busy. It never fully disappeared. After I made that diet change, every single little patch was completely gone. And I didn't even really realize or notice that it was still there because I was just so grateful it was so much better than it had been. But after I was on this diet, I was like, oh, that's how full relief is. Completely gone, never coming back, even though I definitely was stressed and exhausted and all this stuff, completely gone, which is fascinating. And I should note, when I make diet exceptions for an extended period of time, I do notice a small amount of eczema coming back. Every now and then, when I go for weeks or months where I'm not as careful with my diet anymore, I do notice a tiny bit coming back. Another side effect was in the first 2 weeks of switching to this diet, cutting all the things that we cut and adding in the things like celery juice and lemon water. I experienced a ton of gas and bloating and loose stools, but this only lasted for about 2 weeks, and then it completely faded away for me. And then I felt the most peaceful digestion I've ever experienced in my life. So I had previously had, for as long as I can remember in my life, but especially like in high school and college, a lot of bloating and constipation. All of that faded away. It felt like my digestive system was breathing a sigh of relief. And I didn't even know how that feeling felt before. I thought I was like pretty healthy and fine and good, but you don't know how much better you could be. You don't even know you might still have a problem until you experience something like that. And you're like, oh, it could be that good. Wow, nice, good to know. And I should note, I've heard other people say that when they try celery juice, they experience loose stools or things like that for an extended period of time to the point where they have to stop drinking the celery juice. But I think it's very important to note that I did it in combination with a huge change in the rest of my diet. I didn't just do celery juice by itself. It was a huge change in the rest of my diet. And this is why I think that might happen. If certain foods in your diet are triggering something and the celery juice is helping to clear that problem out, if you keep re-triggering it with those foods, the celery juice keeps clearing it out. So if you don't make all these changes at once, you keep re-triggering the problem and then fixing the problem. And that's why you continue to have, that's why I think, or I guess, that you might continue to have those symptoms. Again, I do not know. I'm just guessing here from my experience versus other people's experiences I've heard. And I hope to be able to collect those one day and share them with all of you. Now, I want to point out here that I did completely stop any caffeine. And for me, that's hard. I don't drink a lot of coffee, but I drink a lot of black tea and I eat chocolate, and those both have caffeine in them. And of course, I was super tired at this time, so cutting all caffeine was like very hard. But I was very strict for at least a period of time. And I really think that that had a huge positive impact on my digestion too, because later on, while I kept that diet, I did add some caffeine back when I was just too tired to manage the day to day. And I noticed the caffeine really caused my digestion to be more gaseous, more bloating, more constipated, even with the rest of that diet being the exact same. So I do think caffeine does have a very big impact on the quality of your digestion. And if you want to experience that complete relief and peaceful feeling that I felt, I do think cutting caffeine was a major factor for me in that diet. Another very interesting thing is right before I started this diet, when my baby was maybe 2 and 3 months old, really around 3 months, I think I noticed it. I noticed that his feet were like smelly. And I was like, okay, maybe I just need to give him another bath. And I would wash his feet and bathe him, but still they kept being smelly. And I'm like, why? How can a baby's feet be smelly when everything else about him smells so good and is so perfect? Why would his feet be smelly? Like they were mostly open and not even in socks. And to be honest, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, I felt like my own feet got smelly easily too. Even if I changed my socks every day, something about when I was sweating and running around, my feet would easily get smelly. Now, after we did this diet and after this 2 weeks of bloating and kind of clearing out of our digestion system, which, by the way, I forgot to mention earlier, I experienced, my baby experienced it at the same time. He also got a lot of gas, a lot of loose stool and like different looking stool for the same 2 weeks that I did. And then he had no gas and his stool was very normal and very healthy. So he experienced the same thing I did through my breast milk, which is just fascinating. Breast milk in and of itself is a fascinating thing. But somehow the diet change affected him in the same way of clearing out or whatever, his digestion. And after that clearing out, his feet stopped smelling. And mine got a ton better too. I don't know why, but something about the diet change and maybe the celery juice clearing out. I mean, they say that if you have like bacteria and whatever in your stomach, that can affect your scent or your smell. Maybe it has something to do with that. I don't know. And the final side effect I wanted to mention is that, I should say, there were no bad side effects aside from that first 2 weeks of bloating and clearing out my digestion. My energy levels. So you're going to be like, what do you mean? You just said you were super tired. Yes, I was super tired, but everything's relative, right? So like before I did this diet compared to after I did the diet, I felt like there was a certain level of brain fog or just like struggle after eating that lifted. So even though I was still deeply exhausted from not getting enough sleep and taking care of a small baby, my energy levels relative from before I started the diet to after I implemented the diet, or let's say a few weeks after or a month or two after, my energy levels noticeably improved. And actually, I don't think I would have been able to consistently keep pulling off this diet and all the work that it took if I hadn't experienced that increase in my energy levels. It really helped. And the brain fog just kind of like lifted. I didn't even know I had brain fog. Like, you don't know how good you could feel until you try something like this and you feel better and you're like, wait, I wasn't as healthy as I thought I was. How did other people react to seeing Archer's eczema and to seeing it healed? So, of course, everyone was super happy for us when his eczema completely faded away. But when I shared the details in the story with other people whose kids had eczema, they told me that the kid had eczema. They never came back and asked me for the details again. They listened, they were like, oh, wow, impressive. But they never came back and asked me for the details, which makes me think either they didn't really believe it or they just didn't feel like putting in the effort or it seemed too hard. I don't really know. I think maybe they didn't believe it because if they believed it, you'd think they would at least want to give it a try, right? Like, I don't know. And even some people close to me even still suggested, oh, maybe it was just related to the seasons. And I'm like, did you see the bandages wrapped around my baby's arm all last summer? And now, did you see all winter how he has no eczema on his arm? Like, it's definitely not because of the seasons. Like, there's other factors here that clearly had a huge impact. But that's the kind of thing that it was so clear to me because I knew exactly what we had changed diet-wise, and I saw the changes day to day. But for someone just hearing that story, I think it's hard to believe, frankly. And that is why we need proof. I'm going to get on my soapbox for 1 minute. Bear with me here. Pardon me. And this is not directed at any one person or any profession. I just am so frustrated with the state of the system, and I have a strong desire to improve it. The pediatrician, multiple pediatricians, we saw different pediatricians at the same practice. They never recommended anything except steroid cream. They never recommended any diet changes, any other steps whatsoever. They weren't necessarily against us trying an elimination diet, but let me just add on one thing there. An elimination diet would never have worked. If you try just one change at a time, there's no way you can trace the impact of that change. Remember, it took months for the symptoms to get worse and then better before they faded away on just one change, which was that iron supplement. It took about 5 or 6 months. Imagine if you tried just wheat and then just dairy and then just eggs. Like, how would you be able to tell? It's not like the symptoms just changed and went away a week later. An elimination diet would have been impossible. Like, to actually tell what worked and what didn't. Again, we are just so lucky we stumbled upon this diet that completely worked. We would never have been able to figure out all of those details by themselves. Now, to be fair, I don't know which steps may or may not be necessary in there, but an elimination diet, I don't think that even would have worked. But back to what I was saying before, the doctors never recommended anything natural, only steroid cream, which, as I explained in what I saw, just suppressed the symptoms in one area and pushed them to another area. And if we had tried that elimination diet and just removed gluten and nothing happened like I did in college, we might have thought that diet wasn't the solution and there's no options. I'm just so glad that we stumbled upon that full diet when we did. I do not want to think about how hard life would have been if we hadn't figured all of that out. The level of his eczema and how bad it was, I don't know how long he or I could have tolerated that. I mean, I'm so grateful. But I just can't stop thinking about all the other kids and people out there who are suffering from eczema that bad. And the doctors don't recommend any of these solutions because they're not proven. I don't blame the doctors. I really don't. These solutions are not proven. They can't recommend things that are not tested and proven. It's a problem with the system. It will take time and a ton of data to be gathered to be able to prove which of these diets and which combinations are actually effective. Approximately 13% of all kids in the U.S. suffer from eczema. According to the National Eczema Association, 9.6 million kids currently suffer from eczema under the age of 18. That is suffering that I've seen can be completely eliminated with healthy solutions where the only side effect is being healthier. That's not just suppressing symptoms like with a steroid cream. And again, I'm not necessarily saying that the diet I follow, the exact diet, is the only solution out there. But diet-related or natural-related solutions I've seen with my own eyes have the potential to completely get rid of severe eczema. And this needs to be proven. It needs to be proven to the point that a doctor can recommend it to a patient, because so many people are not aware of or don't even know where to look. I mean, even I didn't know. I just stumbled upon this answer. It can't be luck. It can't be guesswork. It can't be this hard to come across a solution for 9.6 million kids in the US. And that doesn't even count all the adults. And that doesn't even count all the other chronic health conditions out there that people are suffering from that they don't have good answers to. And that is the purpose of starting this podcast. We need to start somewhere. Like, I know I'm just starting in one spot, collecting a couple stories, but like, we have to start gathering this. We have to start moving towards a point where we are collecting this data and not just writing it off as hippie nonsense. Like, we are done with that. We are done with accepting the current conventional solutions as the only options for eczema. Steroid cream is simply not a solution for eczema. We have to move past that. We have to find something better. Okay, I'll stop now. Thank you for listening. What was maybe the most important thing that I learned or observed from this experience? Well, there's many things, and I've already mentioned several of them, but I would say in all cases, the eczema got worse before it got better. And by all, I mean from the beginning, when we finally cut the grains, and when we added that iron supplement and then cut the iron supplement again, every time the eczema symptoms got a little or a lot worse before they got better. And it's just important to know that and expect that, because it feels very hard. It's like, oh, it's not working. It's getting worse. And it doesn't just last and get worse for a week or 2 weeks. It could be a month, 2, 3, 4 months of symptoms getting worse and being really bad and staying bad before they get better. And that's where I would love to collect more stories and information to get a range of time that multiple different people experienced in their eczema symptoms fading away, to understand and give people an idea of what they might expect. In our case, I would say it was anywhere from 3 to 6 months of the symptoms getting worse and then getting better again. Now, what were the most valuable resources to me as part of this healing journey? First and foremost, Anthony Williams' books were very helpful. I particularly read his first book called Medical Medium, and I read his other book called Life-Changing Foods. And he has many other books out there. Those are the two that I had at the time and that I referred to. And, you know, while everything I did from his recommendations I've shared, sometimes it helps to kind of read from the source or just read the other details if you wish. Again, a disclaimer, I don't know if just a vegan diet and grain-free diet would have worked. I don't know what changes would have happened if I hadn't added specific things like celery juice or those specific ingredients that he recommends to put in that smoothie. If I hadn't done those things, but I had just done a vegan grain-free diet, maybe that would have worked too. Maybe it would have taken a little longer. I simply don't know. That's the kind of thing that you need to collect multiple stories, people trying different things to understand what the impact of those changes might be. All I know is the combination of things that he recommended that I implemented, overall, that worked. Another super helpful resource was many people have published amazing recipes online that are so creative and so inventive. One of my favorites is someone who goes by the name of Minimalist Baker. I refer to her recipes like if I need a go-to alternative ingredient recipe, I will first see if she has a recipe for what I'm looking for, because she's so creative. I just love her recipes. Shout out to Minimalist Baker. And sometimes I would have to adapt some of the ingredients because let's say she used almond flour and I was trying to avoid nuts for the school lunches. So I would just sub something out, but it was a great place to start. And there are other amazing people out there publishing all of these recipes. Two more that I love are Love and Lemons and Cookie and Kate. Those are some of my favorite recipe bloggers. And other people on Instagram, I found an amazing red lentil tofu recipe on Instagram. And there's all kinds of creative solutions out there on all the different social media channels. So that was really helpful. Definitely explore those. And food delivery, don't underestimate the importance of having regularly available supply of the ingredients that you need to keep doing the recipes that you're doing. It never ends, right? You need to keep getting a supply of frozen fruit for those smoothies. You need to keep getting a supply of whole buckwheat cereal and all this other stuff, which you can't necessarily find in every grocery store. So making sure to find, if you are trying a diet change like this, make sure to find a good, steady source of the ingredients that you need and an easy way to get them. Like, we order 50 bananas a week. I'm not kidding. I'm not joking. Like, we literally have a grocery store section of bananas in our house at any given point in time. Now, if I were guiding someone else on how to implement this diet, these are some of the tips I would recommend. Where there's a will, there's a way. If you truly want to heal, it is definitely possible. Maybe the first solution won't work. Maybe you'll have to tweak things a little bit for yourself. You'll have to experiment a little bit. But I've seen now, between my own chronic mental health changes and then the diet changes, different combinations of things, it is possible. Another thing is, the difficulties won't last forever. There will be relief and breaks later on. And let yourself have those breaks when you really need them. So when we were doing this diet, we were very strict for like the first 6 months. And then as it started to get into the summer, as eczema was fading away, fall, you start to get into the holiday season, I was like, I really crave a croissant right now. I'm going to have a croissant. And I started making a few exceptions, and I took a break and I let myself have those breaks. And you know what? It gave me the relief of the cravings that I had. It gave me the relief I needed to be able to go back to the diet and keep it up. Do you know why? Because I ate that croissant, I had that cheddar cheese, and I was like, it's good, but it's not quite as good as I remembered, frankly. I remembered the idea of it being so good, but like some of the new foods I was making were pretty good too. And I was like, I actually am okay with living without this. Sometimes I do want it, I'm not going to lie. But my point is, living through those cravings, working through them, and just observing your own feelings and your own way of looking at each type of food, it's fascinating. Your tastes can change over time. Sometimes willpower and just powering through and making yourself do something is not always best. Sometimes giving yourself that break might help you to reset, and then maybe you might not crave something so much anymore, and it's like easier. So small exceptions like that, after a period of time, I would say try to be really strict for maybe like, I don't know, 6 months would be my recommendation, but it could be different for different people. And after that, like, feel it out. If you really feel like you just need a break, give yourself a break and then go again and then start again. And, and that's okay. Your body went on a certain type of food for X number of years that you've been alive, right? Like, it can handle a week or two of exceptions and then go back to what it's doing to process or improve. That's my take on it. Another thing is, start slow. Don't try to make every single change at once. It'll be way too overwhelming. Maybe start by just, I don't know, adding that morning smoothie, and then cut wheat. Figure out how you're going to replace wheat, and then figure out how you're going to replace dairy, and then make a meal plan and figure out how you're actually going to eat throughout the day that fits the plan you're doing. Maybe it's grain-free and vegan. Figure out the plan, and then try all of that together, and then try the celery juice and the lemon water, and then do it a little gradually. You don't necessarily have to do everything at once. Keep a list of key recipes, maybe like a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet. Ideally, in the future, there will be something better than an Excel spreadsheet, but it works for now. It worked for me. Of, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack options, your favorites, things that work, things that didn't. I also, for my favorite recipes, I have a note in my phone, in my notes app, where I write down the changes I made and the final version that worked, and I update it if I change that over time. Because, yeah, I haven't found a great way to keep that up to date, and you need to make sure to note the changes that you make so you can remember the next time. Another tip would be the different lotions that I use, and I did kind of mention this before, but whipped shea butter is really good and soothing. And there's this Earth Mama herbed diaper balm, which I had actually been using as diaper cream. It works really nicely as a soothing ointment, and it has some herbs in it that I think help to calm and soothe the skin as well. And that is really nice. And I bought rolls of gauze and I just wrapped that gauze around his arm, and that really helped to soothe it. I want to share for a few minutes some interesting observations and thoughts I've had on both my experience and my son's experience with eczema, and a few other things as well. So when you compare my son's experience with eczema to my experience with eczema, obviously there's a huge difference, right? For me, I felt like about 90% was triggered by my chronic mental stress patterns. And for my son, it was all diet related, from what I can tell. Being that he's a baby, it's kind of safe to assume that. Now, what this goes to show, or my interpretation here, is first of all, different solutions are a better fit for different people, given their conditions, and it could be hugely different. It could be 100% diet for one person. It could be 100% mental health for someone else, and it could be a mix anywhere in between. And another key thing is, if I hadn't figured out that chronic mental health stress patterns piece before I tried the diet, I probably would have thought the diet wouldn't have worked for me. But it did help me with the final 10% of my eczema. And I wouldn't have been able to realize that if I hadn't dealt with the mental health piece first, because I think that would have been so overpowering, I wouldn't have noticed the difference from the diet. So the order in which you try things may also impact how you observe the success of those things or the impact they have on you. And this is why testing natural solutions is so difficult. If you design a top-down study where you're testing the effect of diet, it's going to be effective on some people and not on others. Does that mean it's not effective? Maybe not. Maybe those other people have a stronger need to deal with the mental health component first, or maybe something else out there that I don't even know about right now. Point being, natural solutions is not that they don't work. It's the right amount for the right person for their conditions. That is what has to be figured out. And the exact details of those diets. That's what we're dealing with. The true power of impactful solutions that are just so complex, but not impossible. We can figure it out. Also, it is incredible that my baby could heal through my breast milk. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I mean, that just goes to show the power or the ability of the changes you make to help your baby through your breast milk. And you're not helpless until they get old enough to eat food. You can actually do it right away. Now, there were times when my breast milk supply started to go down, and I panicked because I did not want to have to put him on a formula, which is usually a dairy-based, cow-based formula that probably would have re-triggered his eczema. I'm very empathetic to people who do have to put their babies on formula because I understand it is not easy. I really struggled to keep my supply up at times, and it was very stressful. And I fully empathize with the need to use formula sometimes. But in my experience, the power of the breast milk to be able to implement these changes was real and was powerful. So if at all possible, I would recommend it. Of course, I really do understand if that's not possible. And you'll get to a point where the baby is old enough and they're eating food. And I did not continue giving cow's milk or any other milk to my baby. He was completely vegan for a long period of time. And he's quite healthy and doing very well today by all measures, by the pediatrician's measures, by the measures at school, compared to his peers, from his teacher. He is very healthy and doing very well. Another thing to note is the power of positive thinking and belief in your body's ability to heal, I think is extremely important. If you're like, it's not going to work, and it's too hard, and I did think it was too hard, but if you don't have optimism about it and excitement and positivity, I think it will be harder to implement and harder maybe for your body to be able to heal. Again, that's just my guess. I don't know. I wasn't controlling my baby's moods and he's still healed. But for me personally, I think it would have been very hard to pull this off if I didn't really have very much optimism about it and didn't have very much hope. Now, how does this experience continue to play out in our lives today? Overall, we do still stick to this diet mostly, but we do make exceptions as needed or desired. As I said, sometimes if I'm really craving a break or just craving some things I used to eat, I'll take a break or I'll make an exception, and maybe I'll make an exception for a few days in a row or even a few weeks or even a few months in a row. And yes, my eczema might come back a little bit, but it's okay. I know how to get rid of it again, and I know it's mostly gone. As far as my son, my baby, once his eczema had been gone for about a year, at this point he was probably between 2 and 3, we decided to try and just test and see if it came back easily if we made a few exceptions. So we tried a few exceptions. We tried giving him like pizza or toast. And at first, nothing happened. And we were like, he's gone forever. But then it did come back a little bit. Now, not nearly as bad as before, but if we, for example, if he ate a lot of wheat and dairy for a whole week on a vacation, then maybe 2 weeks after that, he would start to get a bit of eczema, like on his back, maybe his arms. And it took like 2 or 3 weeks for it to fade away again. But just a few exceptions here and there, like a pizza dinner one night, and then 2 weeks later, another exception, that didn't seem to make any difference. And what this means is, once you have healed the bulk of the problem, you can make a few exceptions here and there as needed. If you go on a family vacation, if there's a big event, holidays, whatever, you no longer have to be as strict. And I think this is really important for the kid too, because the kid could feel really restricted if they're never allowed to have anything that everyone else is having. And I mean, when they grow up, they're going to just do what they want anyways, right? So like, I think in general, my kids really love most of the foods we eat on a day-to-day basis, but they also love being able to have an exception. And I think finding that balance and being able to do that without triggering a lot of eczema again, I'm so glad and so grateful that that seems to be the case. And we did try adding eggs and fish again. We tested them out separately, and we found that neither of them actually triggered his eczema. So we gave him lots of eggs many days in a row for weeks on end with no other changes, and he never got any eczema from the eggs. And you know what's really interesting? He loves eggs. He just wants to eat so many eggs. And to me, this indicates that his body needs some nutrients in those eggs, because actually they say kids naturally crave what their bodies need. Also, I think there's limited information out there that I feel comfortable with that proves that having a kid on a fully vegan diet is the healthiest option in the long run. Kids are growing quickly and they need a lot of nutrients and a lot of proteins. And while I do think a vegan diet has many health benefits, and I personally prefer a vegan diet at this point, I think I feel best on a vegan diet, and I don't really want to eat like dairy and eggs and things like that. I think it's important to make sure that kids are getting what they need. And at this point, I don't think there's adequate proof out there. It's still a little confusing to me. And I'm not saying it's certain either way. And again, I did do a vegan diet for a couple of years with my youngest son, with both my kids. But at this point, my one son loves fish, doesn't like eggs. My other son loves eggs, doesn't want fish. And that's okay. I'm letting them have that. It doesn't seem to be triggering his eczema, and he seems to really want it. And the last major thing I want to share about my experience is I would advise that you trust your instincts. And I want to share a story where this was important. So at one point, when my son's eczema was very bad on his arm, at the same time, strep throat went through our family. So we all got sick. We all got strep. And right around that time, his arm, which was already super red and itchy from the eczema, suddenly got these other red spots on it that looked different to me. They looked worse, like scary red. Like, I mean, the eczema was scary already. So I don't know how to describe this, but all I'm saying is I knew it looked different and it looked worse. It didn't look like the typical eczema that I was used to seeing, even the bad version. And I knew we had all just had strep and it was kind of spread. This new weird rash was kind of spreading fast. And I was like, I don't feel comfortable just leaving it and assuming that the diet will help it go away. So I felt like I wanted to get the doctor's recommendation on it. Now, keep in mind, I already said the doctor never recommended anything except steroid cream for eczema, but I felt like maybe this wasn't eczema. And I felt like it would be safer to get a second opinion from conventional medicine. So I took my son to the pediatrician. They took a look and they were like, oh, wow. And they tested it and it seemed to be something viral or bacterial. It could have been an infection. It could have been strep on the skin. I still don't know for sure, but it was not just eczema. And they recommended an antibacterial cream and an antiviral medicine to take internally. And the pediatrician hesitated a bit to give the antiviral medicine to a baby that young, but she wasn't sure, so she gave me the prescription for both. And I used the antibacterial cream. I applied that, and I also alternated with a natural paste that I made myself from some ingredients I researched, bentonite clay, and some essential oils that have very strong antibacterial and antiviral properties, like oregano oil and tea tree oil and a few others. I made like a little paste and I spread it on his arm, alternating with that antibacterial cream that was prescription antibacterial cream. The antiviral medicine was out of stock at all the local pharmacies, didn't come in for like a week or so. And by the time it came in, this new, weird, strange rash had faded away completely. And I didn't end up having to give him that antiviral one. Thank goodness. So I'm so glad that I did go to the pediatrician. I had it assessed and I did use a conventional treatment for that new type of rash. And here's where I want to emphasize something that I think is really important. Listen to your instinct. Don't be dogmatic that I'm only going to use natural solutions for everything and all conventional medicine is bad and wrong. If you haven't realized this already, folks, the world is simply not black and white, right? Nothing is all good. Nothing is all bad. There are really important, amazing, promising, incredible solutions in conventional medicines for certain conditions. And often that is more serious or urgent or life-threatening conditions are often much better treated with conventional medicine. Some chronic conditions may be better treated with natural solutions, but that research needs to be done. It needs to be tested, and that's why I'm doing this podcast. But it does not mean that I am in any way, shape, or form against all conventional medicine. And the key here is to use the right and best solution for each given condition. And if a conventional solution is the best and most effective, then that should still be used. And for optimal health and safety, if you're ever doubting something and it seems to be getting worse badly and you're not sure why, go to your doctor. Don't hesitate. Like, get an assessment. Even if they're like, oh, no, it's just eczema. It just got worse. And they give you steroid cream. Fine. You don't have to take the steroid cream if you don't want to. But just get that double check that it's not something more life-threatening or worse. And don't, in my recommendation, my experience, my opinion, don't rule out the power of conventional medicine for the things that it is really good for. And sometimes that can even include temporary relief. Like I take ibuprofen or acetaminophen or any of these fever reducers, and I give them to my kids too when they have really high fevers, because that is the most effective thing to reduce fever and relieve pain in these situations. To take some of these medicines over time every single day, that's where I think like chronic condition symptom suppression is not effective. We need to get towards true solutions that address the underlying causes of these chronic conditions. But for temporary symptom relief, often conventional medicine actually has the best options. So overall, try to be open-minded. Don't be too dogmatic. Consider the best options in both conventional and natural solutions. Trust your instinct. Get advice from your doctor. Don't hesitate to ask a conventional doctor or an alternative doctor for their opinions. And let's hope that we can get towards a place where there's more research on the natural solutions in the near future. And let's hope that we can get to a place where it's not like all pharmaceutical companies are evil and all natural remedies are hippie solutions that don't actually work. Hopefully we can move past that soon and see the value in both and really understand for which conditions, which is the best option. That's where I hope to get. So with that, thank you so much for listening to this second episode. I hope you enjoyed it or got something useful out of it, and I look forward to coming back soon with the third episode. And if you have a story about healing from eczema or about healing from any other chronic health condition using all natural solutions or majority natural solutions, please let me know. Contact me. I am excited about collecting these stories and sharing them on this podcast.